Hello and welcome to Giant Mess, a sloppy sports and entertainment talk show that covers a little bit of everything. It's all over the map, from New York Giants football to Mets baseball, movie reviews, TV show recaps and reactions, with some life lessons and funny stories mixed in for good measure. It's hosted by Giant Mess. That's me, the real cinch, Neal Lynch. On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing Cocaine Bear, a little engine that could, underrated horror comedy that kind of swept the internet when its trailer debuted in December and has received fairly good buzz heading into its opening weekend. And then another horror comedy called M3GAN, Model 3 Generation Android something, starring Allison Williams as an engineer at a high-tech toy company that manufactures a companion for her niece who lost her parents in a tragic car accident. So without further ado, let's get this fucking train out the station. Ironic that I would say that. That was just on my mind because we're going to be talking about Cocaine Bear. Okay, first and foremost, Cocaine Bear. Horror comedy, as I mentioned, inspired by the 1985 true story of a drug runner's plane crash missing cocaine and the black bear that ate it. It's wildly dark comedy, finds an oddball group of cops, criminals, tourists, and teens converging in a Georgia forest where a 500-pound apex predator has ingested a staggering amount of cocaine and has gone on a coke-fueled rampage for more blow and blood. I mean, how do you not greenlight that? How do you not greenlight? Just based on the title alone, that's a green light for me, dog. Like, Cocaine Bear. Yes. Awesome. I remember when this trailer hit back in, I guess it would have been around Christmas time, December 2022. And it had the White Lines song kind of remixed as the soundtrack for the trailer. And, we've pretty much all of us have heard about the story. And so that was like an easy layup, right? It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you produce this movie? It just makes all the sense in the world. I think there have been people that said, like, if this had come out during the heat of the thick of the pandemic, that it would have gone to streaming, which is fairly obvious when no one was going to theaters. But then there was that period where it's like, theaters are open, you're invited to come, but like, and I think that a lot of companies might not have risked that. And so I don't know that this would have gotten a theatrical run, and but it did get a theatrical run, and I saw it in the theaters. I saw it. I wasn't able to go Friday, Saturday, or Sunday because I was with the little one, my daughter, but I did make sure to hop on that train on Monday night, and was surprised to see that it wasn't sold out. The leading up to its release, like, I listened to Conan Needs a Friend. He interviewed Elizabeth Banks, who is the director and producer. She directed Charlie's Angels, that remake in 2019 that kind of bombed. Had the lady from the Twilight series as one of the Charlie's Angels. She directed Pitch Perfect 2. She's also produced, I think she produced Pitch Perfect 3. And she also directed a segment of movie 43, a notoriously awful movie, from what I've heard. I haven't watched it. I think I did see a clip from that, and I was like, wow, what the fuck is this? How did they get so many people of, like, name actors to participate in this god-awful film? So I listened to the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend interview with Elizabeth Banks. I just, Lights, Camera, Barstool is a podcast I listen to from Barstool Sports, focusing on movies and TV shows. They were really high on it, pun intended. And so this was like the little engine that could, right? It was the underrated comedy horror movie that a February release, when, most movies that are released in February are usually stinkers, right? That's like a downtime in the movie going schedule calendar. It's probably the worst month for movie releases, right? But this is one that's like, okay, it's been relegated to that kind of bad month, but then again, like, the original Deadpool, first Deadpool came out in February and like did almost $1 billion at the box office globally. So this is not anywhere close to doing Deadpool numbers, but there was the sense that, like, okay, this is like the darling. This is an underrated underground kind of, even though it's not an indie, right? It's released by Universal Pictures, but it does feel like this could be something that sweeps the nation and sweeps the globe as coming out of nowhere and being a hit. Like, the expectations for a movie like Cocaine Bear out the gate is probably tepid at best, right? But there was this groundswell, right? People talking really positively and highly about it. Like it exceeded their expectations. Conan O'Brien included, the guy who I value his opinion, and Lights, Camera, Barstool, I somewhat value their opinion, the guys on there. So I was excited. I think normally without that kind of positive word of mouth, I probably just would have waited. I wouldn't have gone to see it in the theater. I would have waited until it hit streaming, but I was like, man, I got to get ahead of this. And I wanted to, so I went and saw it on Monday night, and I did that specifically so I could get a review out on Tuesday night. And then lo and behold, like, there were a couple of reasons why that didn't happen on Tuesday night. One of which being and I don't want to ruin the review, but I'll start with the first part. There was a fatality, not like Mortal Kombat fatality, like we saw in The Last of Us episode 7, which I can talk about another time. But fatality at the Princeton Junction train station, which is the train station that I live closest to. It's what I take into work 2 to 3 days a week. So I'd gone into the office on Tuesday, and on my way back, they basically stopped us at the Jersey Avenue station, which it's an express train, so it's not supposed to stop at the Jersey Avenue station. And they said, there's been a fatality. I thought they said passenger. And I was like, oh my God, like on the train, there's been a passenger fatality. But I think they ended up clarifying and saying pedestrian strike, which means that someone either fell on the train tracks, was pushed on the train tracks. There was a person on the tracks, and they got struck by an Amtrak train, not even a Jersey Transit train, which I take New Jersey Transit, but the Amtrak runs on those same rails. And typically, like what I've seen from Amtrak, they don't typically stop at Princeton Junction. They come through that station at like 200 miles per hour. It's like a bullet train. I mean, it's just unfathomable how fast they're going past us. So like you're on that train and they're going full speed. They're not stopping at Princeton Junction. You're toast. Like you're not surviving that. So my guess is it's a suicide. But who knows? I mean, typically if they're coming through, they're not stopping there on the middle tracks, which you'd have to be, to be pushed, you'd have to be like thrown onto those tracks. I don't even know how you would, so odds are probably was a suicide or someone who was just oblivious to where they were and what they were doing. So I didn't get home I usually get home around 7-ish. And I didn't get home till like 9:30, and I had to spend like $90 on an Uber just to get home. So that was partially the reason why I was like, not really feeling doing an extensive full review for Cocaine Bear now after that happened. The other part of it was I was just severely disappointed. I left that theater and I was like, fuck. I mean, in my head, how I saw it all rolling out was like, you go in, and the theater's like kind of packed, which is odd for a Monday. Which I knew once I bought the ticket, as soon as I knew that I was going to be able to, I made it into Princeton Junction on Monday night. I was like, all right, I can officially buy the ticket. Cause if I bought that ticket like Monday morning, New Jersey Transit would fucking do what they always do and like cancel trains. And then there would be a fatality. So I waited until I actually got into Princeton to buy a ticket. And when I bought the ticket, I saw like, wow, there's seats galore. There are just open seats everywhere. And this is opening weekend-ish. Monday night's not really the weekend, but it's like the Monday after the opening weekend. I understand Monday nights are not, I mean, who goes to the movies on Monday nights? This guy, That's, I completely understand that. But, there have been movies like Top Gun Maverick. There are a couple other movies where it's like I go on like a Sunday, which is not typically a busy movie day, I don't think. And it's tough to get a seat. This was not tough at all. Like there were tons of seats open. So I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. I was expecting it to be at least few more people in the audience. So that should have been I guess the first sign that I was going to be disappointed. But yeah, just left that screening being like, fuck, I wanted to like be so entertained, moved, and have such a positive reaction to it that I'd come and maybe even do a reaction that night And then, but definitely like, have that kind of excitement come through on the podcast on Tuesday night. And I was like, I'm just not excited about the movie, how it turned out. Like, I don't even know if I need to do a review but I'm coming across as this contrarian, because I think you're seeing a lot of people like Lights, Camera, Barstool, Conan saying like, oh, it's so funny. One of the funniest movies of the year. So fun. And I just didn't get that experience. I didn't get it. Like, I went into the theater. It was pretty empty. There was a group of guys behind me who were cracking up most of the movie. And I was like, man, I wish I was on that level. This movie had me questioning reality, had me questioning my mental state, my mindset, had me questioning my sense of humor. I was like, am I just not, what is wrong with me? I was just like, what is wrong with me? It just didn't click for me. And I think partially the reason might've been, my state of mind, my mindset, because that earlier that day at work in the morning when I went to the bathroom, I don't know why I was thinking this or how I was thinking this, but I can only describe as like a panic attack, I think, or just severe existential dread. I don't know why I was at work. I don't know why it happened in the bathroom, but it was just like, I started every once in a while, and it's usually during the Sunday scaries, right? You're laying in bed, if you're working a normal 9-to-5 job, you got to go into the office the next day. You've been relaxing, partying, doing nothing with your life over the weekend, destroying your body and your mind. And then, the Sunday realization comes around that like, oh, fuck, I now have to be normal and go back to work and be as a functioning member of society again. And that's usually when your mind starts to go off the rails. And that's what happened. That usually is when the place and the location and the time for when that dread comes in, where I start to think about, what am I doing with my life? But then that leads to, fuck, time is running out. And, oh no, I'm 42. And like, oh no, all these things that I was supposed to have accomplished and achieved by now haven't happened. And like, am I any closer to that? And what is my legacy going to be? And what is it like when you die? What happens after you die? And then the realization that odds are, all indications, all signs point to like nothing. And what does nothing feel like? Because like right now, it's like I'm seeing, I'm hearing, I'm smelling, I'm feeling, but there's like nothing. I've never felt nothing and saw nothing and heard nothing and like nothing. And so then, that like it's unbelievable what goes on from that point. And maybe you've experienced this, but from my tippity top of my head all the way down to my piggy toes, there's just this wave of like, whoa. It's almost like my body's trying to project or guess or predict what nothing feels like. It's a really weird, bad feeling. Nothing. So that happened in the morning. And I'm pretty sure that had an effect and impact on my viewing experience of Cocaine Bear. Like you go from, oh my God, like my body, my mind are trying to like simulate death where like, okay, there's nothing. And I don't even get to see how people react to my, you know what I mean? Like there's always that fantasy, or I don't know if that's a Miracle on 34th Street or whatever the hell that Christmas movie is, but like where you get to see how people would react if you died. Like what would people be saying about you? What would the consensus be? You don't get to experience or see any of that. And the thought that like when you die, you don't get to see, you don't know or how, it's all this stuff that it's just like, boop, that's it. You're just boop, gone. Like there's nothing else. And that's, it really can do a number on you. So I think that probably had an impact on me going into this movie. And then as I'm sitting there, with my large ass bucket of popcorn by myself, because I'm a loser, baby. Yeah. I started, and the trailers are coming on. I started thinking about like what would happen if a guy, and all of a sudden it became the plot of a movie. Like I'm in a movie theater watching trailers, waiting for the movie, and I'm thinking about what happens if a person just walks in this, and I'm like the only person in this theater, vastly empty theater, and just sits right next to me. It's like, dude, there's all these other seats. You can't sit anywhere else. And then that person shows me their phone and it says like, I have planted bombs in every movie theater in America. And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to blow them all up. And they're all packed with people, even though it's a Monday night. And so now I'm like creating this friggin' movie in my head, waiting for a movie as movie trailers are playing about just an insane premise. And I'm like, all right, dude, whatever, get the fuck away from me. You're a psycho. And then he shows me a live stream, and it's a movie theater. And then it's like explosion goes off to show that he's serious. And then now I started to take him seriously. And it's like, I'm creating all this in my head. And then Evil Dead Rise, that fucking new Evil Dead reboot trailer comes on. And I can't even watch it. I can't even bring myself to watch it because I have watched it. I think I've watched it in the past, and it's just like I think it's the sounds that get to me, like the squishy sounds and like the egg hitting the pan, and it's like I can't. No thanks. So that should give you some insight into, like, I have horror brain and I appreciate suspense mystery thrillers, but I don't think I have the stomach or even that type of dark black humor within me. Like, I love Weekend at Bernie's. Weekend at Bernie's is a dark comedy, black comedy. It's two guys, their boss dies, and they carry him around and make him look like he's alive for the weekend. That's pretty, like, my 8-year-old, 9-year-old brain was like, this is hilarious. And it's like, I didn't even think about, oh, well, that guy's dead. He's not experiencing any of this. Like, he doesn't know anything's going on. He's not conscious. He's just not processing. Like, but like, I still can watch that movie today and enjoy it and appreciate it. So why can't I appreciate this horror comedy? And I guess for me and for a lot of people that enjoyed it, the comedy comes from a lot of the like really gory, nasty, graphic horror, that's just not in my wheelhouse. Like, for whatever reason, I can appreciate cartoons on that level where it's like over the top violence. And I was thinking about this as the movie was happening, because like I wouldn't say detached, but I was just like, my mind started going elsewhere. I was like, why am I not enjoying this? Like the group behind me, like the group of guys behind me, where like, there's a scene where, there's a scene where there's an ambulance, and the patient in the ambulance that's driving away from the bear, the patient on the stroller, like as the ambulance is speeding away, like falls out of the trailer and like flips so that the patient is, facing downward, and like hits the ground and skids and like rips off the face. And it's just like, I was like, ooh, like, oh, like that turned my stomach. And these motherfuckers behind me are laughing. And I was just like, and I'm not criticizing them for laughing. I just don't have that disposition. I just don't have that within me to, but if it's almost like if that were a cartoon, like there's some really violent cartoons and you can laugh because it's so cartoonish. It's so like, it's just so absurd and ridiculous that's when I laugh. This felt like too real, if that's, I don't know. And I started thinking about, like, I remember I do laugh at some ultra violent stuff, but like it is cartoonish. And I started thinking about, what was it, that Grindhouse movie? And there's a 2-parter, right? And I don't know if it's the Tarantino one or the Rodriguez one. I think Tarantino is the one with the car and Kurt Russell. That one was ultra violent. And I was like, I could feel my stomach turning. And I was like, I can't, it's too real. The other one was like they're shooting essentially what are zombies or mutants or something like that. And it's just like, an ungodly amount of blood, like buckets of blood flying everywhere. And to me, that's funny because like I know it's not real. It's over the top. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. This was just like too real for me. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm watching, like I'm enjoying, like I'm supposed to enjoy and entertain and watch all these people just get savagely attacked by a bear. That's funny. Like am I laughing at that? Because there were people laughing at that. And I was just like, you know what? Maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. Like that younger generation has seen some shit and been through so much shit and seen so much on the internet, the early days of the internet when they're growing up, the formative years, developing that, beheadings and whatnot. So things so graphic in nature that can't even bring myself to watch even now as a grown ass man, this is funny to them, where it's like, it's just a bear ripping through people. I didn't laugh a ton, I guess is what I'm saying. There was, I mean, I could name probably on one hand 3 times 2 to 3 times where I laughed out loud. One was a gag that was like no one else laughed at because I don't think anyone else really noticed. Was like on the sign, there was on the billboard. I think it said like it was advertisement for a big billboard ad for a bar, and towards the bottom it said like either home of the original glory hole or brand new glory hole or something like that on the bottom of the sign. And I was like, oh, that's nice. That's funny. A little chuckle, you know. And I think like Alden Ehrenreich, whatever, sitting in the bar eating pasta, like is just a funny, like who goes to a bar, gets shit canned and like eats penne pasta without chicken. Like that's funny. That got a nice laugh out of me. But otherwise, I don't know. I mean, I've kind of gone into a lot of details without giving you any kind of context. You know, it's produced by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And it's like, maybe you're not a huge fan of Pitch Perfect or Elizabeth Banks' work on Charlie Angels or whatnot. But Phil Lord and Chris Miller have an amazing resume of hits. You know, they're known for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Lego movies, so more kids fare, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but also 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street. In my opinion, the last laugh out loud comedy movies that have been released, I guess you could say maybe Trainwreck. You know, I've mentioned this in the past on the pod, but I wrote a blog in like 2017. I think it was after seeing that Get Out was like the top comedy of all time. And I was like, what are we doing here? I mean, what the fuck are we doing here? That's the top comedy of all time? Like, no. Like, great horror, awesome suspense, awesome thrilling. But if we're talking, and this is where, you know, having grown up watching Comedy Central like nonstop and Benny Hill and sitcoms and comedy, like comedy's been my life. And so I've always deferred to, and, you know, it's been a defense mechanism of mine for years. So for me, it's like when I think comedy, I think of like laugh out loud, high laughs per minute, that kind of thing, like lots of laughs, lots of jokes, funny, funny, funny. And I think comedy has gone through this kind of, especially in movies, this transformation of like, we're going to call this a comedy because it's not a drama. And there's like, you know, as long as there's one or like more than two funny parts or more than one funny part, you know, that's, and I have to realize that comedy kind of takes on a broader definition than, oh, you're laughing at every scene. You know, every scene has a laugh. You know, like fucking Anchorman, dude. Like, so that's part of like, I look at it like Get Out as a fucking comedy. Like I understand there's, that just blew my mind. So I think that, you know, 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, Neighbors, you know, Neighbors 2, those Trainwreck were like kind of the last of the, we're going to have a laugh in this scene, every scene throughout the entire comedy, throughout the whole movie. I just don't think you really see that anymore. So I don't view this as a comedy. I think this is a horror movie, and it's just like, it's not a drama. It's got action and it tries to be funny. I just don't know that it's laugh out loud funny. It's kind of like, oh, yeah. Okay. It's written by Jimmy Warden, who wrote the sequel to The Babysitter, which was kind of a cult smash hit. I don't know. It's like a kind of a surprising hit on, I believe, in Netflix. I don't know if it had a theatrical run. The original Babysitter, which I think was directed by McG, I want to say. And then this dude wrote the sequel to The Babysitter, which I think I might have reviewed, called Killer Queen, which was good. It was all right. The movie had a budget of $30 to $35 million, which a large portion of that went to the FX team that created the bear with CGI. I think a lot of people, there's always like a level of nervous and like concern or nerves around a movie that has such a prevailing presence of CGI, like a main component of the movie. Like the titular character, Cocaine Bear, is all CGI. So it's like, that's the trick there. Because if it doesn't look real, it's like, well, the whole movie is ruined. So it's smart of them to put a lot of that budget towards the bear. And I thought, you know, the bear looked good, you know, and I think it's grossed. So the budget was 30, 35 million. I think it's pretty much made that back already at the box office. It's not a long movie, but it felt long. Hour 35 minutes, and it just felt like it dragged. And that's what's so tough is like, it's a great premise, but it's not, there's not a whole lot of plot to it. It's like guy dumps cocaine, bear finds cocaine. And in the real story, true story, the bear ODs on the cocaine. It's like, well, that's not a story. So how do we make it a story? How about the bear doesn't die and goes on a rampage and starts killing a bunch of people? Okay, great. The cast has Keri Russell, who I had a huge crush on for a very long time. And I pretty much still do. I think she plays a mother. I think she's a single mother. Sari, who's also a nurse. O'Shea Jackson Jr., who's in Straight Outta Compton. He's Ice Cube's kid. Plays David, who's like the underling to the drug dealer Sid, played by Ray Liotta in his last performance before passing away. Alden Ehrenreich as Eddie, who plays Sid's son, Ray Liotta's son, who lost his wife to cancer and has abandoned his son. Christian Convery is Henry. He's the Sari's daughter's friend, a boy. Brooklyn Prince is Dee Dee. That's the Sari's daughter, Keri Russell's daughter in the movie. Isaiah Whitlock Jr., who I think is from The Wire. I haven't really watched all of The Wire. Sue me. As Bob, who's a local detective who's intent on bringing down Sid, the drug dealer. Margot Martindale as Ranger Liz, the park ranger. Ray Liotta as Sid, as we mentioned. Jesse Tyler Ferguson from Modern Family as Peter, who is like an inspector, wildlife inspector or something like that Ranger Liz has a crush on. Weird. There was a Duchamp gang. Aaron Holiday, J.B. Moore, and Leo Hanna are the actors playing Stash Vest and Ponytail. Really thought those people were unnecessary. Like, didn't understand why they were in the movie, other than they had to lead. One of the guys saw where the bag was dumped off, and so it's more of a plot device than anything else. So they led David and Eddie to the other bags of cocaine. And then Christopher Huju from Game of Thrones. He was the redhead dude with the long beard as Olaf, who's a tourist, engaged, played one half of an engaged couple that got attacked by the bear in like the opening scene, one of the opening scenes. And then you have Ayula Smart as Officer Reba, who again was just a plot device. Like I guess that was the major plot twist in the movie. And I was just like, okay, cool. Kahyun Kim as Beth, one of the paramedics. Scott Seiss, who you might, I just followed him on social media, but I've been seeing his stuff for a while now on social media. He makes these videos where he's just they're hilarious. I mean, a million times funnier than this movie. His posts, his video posts, where he basically takes down or makes fun of commonly popular expressions towards young people who retail workers, stuff like that. So I highly recommend following him on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you can follow him, TikTok, because he's hilarious in those videos. They're usually set to really dramatic soundtracks or songs playing in the background, where it's like it's so good. I don't even know how to describe it, and that's on me. That's my beat. So he plays the other paramedic, Tom, and I was hoping for and thought he was so close to stealing this movie, not just a scene, just like his scene. I thought his scene was going to steal the movie. That was going to be the thing that was going to be most remembered from this movie. And for the most part, it was, when the paramedics responds to the call at the forest, and his reaction to discovering the bear and then running away from the bear, like probably the best sequence in the movie. But even that sequence, I was just like, oh, this isn't funny. This is fucking so goddamn gratuitous and graphic, but not in a like lighthearted way, like cartoonish way. And then Matthew Rice from The Americans, and the upcoming Perry Mason series on HBO Max. He plays Andrew C. Thornton the second, who's the drug smuggler, who I guess was a agent with the DEA, who then turned and became a smuggler for real. That scene might be the second best scene in the movie, or the best scene in the movie, because it's just the way he played it was his look, and the way he played it was so funny. And then what ends up happening, where you know, he's on the plane and he's transporting a shipment of cocaine on the plane. The plane's going down. He has to ditch the cocaine, so he's got them all in bags and he's tossing the duffel bags out. But he's like kind of dancing and he's got like energy because he's high on cocaine. And tries to parachute out, you know, jump out of the plane before it crashes, and he trips or something and knocks himself out and falls to his death. Like, that's funny. Yeah, a death is, you know, whatever. I like that scene is funny. But then I listened to the interview with O'Shea Jackson Jr. and Alden Ehrenreich on Lights Camera Barstool, and I was like, it was almost like you were witnessing, like, oh, this feels like, is this the next great comedy duo, like buddy comedy? Like, are these guys, is this just a launch point, like launch point for these two to do more projects together as like in buddy comedies? Because they had that kind of rapport with each other and relationship with each other in that interview, and I don't know that came across too much in the movie. Like, there could have been, there's more there, I think, just by listening to that interview. Not to say that it was just like they had zero chemistry on the screen in the movie. They had chemistry in the movie, but it's just never. And I think that goes back to how the characters were written or something like that. I don't know. Like, you know, O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character is wearing a jersey. It looks like the most generic, like, whatever jersey of all time, and then we're supposed to like sympathize with him when he gets in that fight in the bathroom with the Duchamp gang and gets stabbed in the back or the shoulder, and like it ruins his jersey, and we're supposed to, you know, and he's really torn up about it, and it's like, why? That's jersey's like the jersey. What is that jersey? It's like that's not. I don't know. It's just like all the plot points are there. They have the plot devices. It's just, it feels, and I guess this was in the critics' consensus, but it does feel half-baked. It's like, well, we know we have a hit. We know automatically the hook is there. Cocaine Bear. Like, you read that title, you hear that title, and you're like, whoa, what's that? And you lean forward and you want to know more and you want to see more. So they knew they had that. So maybe they rushed through the process. I don't know. It doesn't feel like there's not enough comedic fodder or material there. Or they did, I don't know. It just didn't land with me, most of it. And that's just me. And I'm in the minority because a lot of people, you know, audience, you know, loves this movie. But I just thought, you know, like when the kids discover the cocaine. So I don't even know their names, Henry and Dee Dee, the two kids that I guess are like between the ages of 8 and 12, maybe in that range, 8 to 10. They discover the cocaine because they're going to the falls because the daughter has been asking her mother to go to the falls to paint the falls, which is a thing. And that's when they are in the forest to get lost, I think. And so they discover the cocaine and they end up sticking like a knife into the cocaine and pulling out like an ungodly amount of cocaine on the knife and then like eating it and putting it in their mouth. And so I've never done that, but they spit it out pretty quickly because it's like, it tastes like awful. But then other than the kid being like, oh, I have like something dripping in the back of my throat. There's zero indication that they are high on cocaine the rest of the movie. And maybe that's because I've never done that where I like ate a fucking cup of cocaine and then spit it out almost, you know, instantaneously. But there has to be some kind of lasting effects from that and some comedic gold to be mined there. No? So like the whole sequences, the scenes, the shots with Bob, the detective, the grizzled detective, and this little foo-foo dog, it's like they lean into things that they think are going to be, oh my God, this is hilarious. And we're going to come back to this repeatedly in the movie. Like okay. That feel like, I don't know. Oof. I know. Listen, if you know me, you would think, okay, this is right up my fucking alley. If you know me, you're like, oh, this is like right in Neal's wheelhouse. This is exactly what Neal would love. And that's what is so frustrating to me is like, I just didn't love it. I don't even know if I liked it. It's like, if this comes on again, I'm not going to watch it again. It's just like, because it's to me, it's such a disappointment. It's just a waste. You know, you only really got one crack at this, right? I don't know. Maybe when I'm like On my deathbed, they'll do a remake and it'll actually be funny. But I don't know. It, yeah, there's just a lot. That sucks. You know, the scene with the dude from Social Media and the paramedics, and they're driving away from the bear. And I guess the one paramedic, the male paramedic, is attacked, and then he shows up and his hand is off, like it's the dangling. Like, I almost threw up. Like, it's just, you just gotta have a stomach for this stuff. And some people, that's funny. I don't know. I just didn't find it funny. You know, I think it's just a stretch. A lot of characters. I think they invested a lot of valuable screen time into, okay, this park ranger is into this wildlife inspector who I presume is gay, and like spending more time than is necessary on that kind of sub plot, because we feel like that's giving these characters depth or something, dimension. But it's just like, okay, like, why are we spending time on this? It's just like, and in reading more about it, it sounds like Elizabeth Banks was saying that if the bear were to come back to life or something, this would be the bear's revenge story, and you're just like supposed to sympathize with the bear, which makes a lot more sense for the movie, because it's like a lot of these characters, you're like, none of these characters are that likable, other than the mother daughter, you know, Keri Russell's character, the nurse, and her daughter, like trying to find the daughter. That was where they try to pull at your heartstrings a little bit and provide some kind of like emotional element to it. I mean, you know, the actors did the best they could with the material. It's just, I want a little more, you know, for what people were saying, you know, because at first it's like, okay, cocaine bear, it's the bear that gets high on cocaine and attacks people. It's like, that's pretty straightforward. And that's what the movie was. So it's not like it was bad. It's just like, judging by people's reactions to it and the reviews, and like, oh, it's so fun, so funny, so this, so that, I was just expecting more, and I didn't get it. Setups and payoffs. You know, we've talked about it before. Setups and payoffs. This is the setup. Here's the payoff. This is the setup. Here's the payoff. And a lot of it felt like it was just inserted as plot devices to make sure the movie made sense, as opposed to, here's a setup that in the moment you're either like piques your interest or you don't pay attention to, but that has a really incredible payoff at the end. Like spoiler, Ray Liotta at the end of the movie dies, obviously, because he's a bad dude, drug dealer, and he's the one who's keeps insisting that they find all the drugs, because if they don't, they're going to get murdered, which is a legitimate concern. Like, you're dealing with the cartel or whatever major organization that's probably pissed that they're losing tons and tons of money from their product. And so he's adamant about, like, we got to recover this, otherwise we're toast. So he keeps going and everyone else bails, and he gets disemboweled. And then the little cub bears start eating his entrails. And it's just like, ugh. And I think there were people laughing in the audience, and I was just like, nope, this is just not the movie for me. I didn't find that Stash, one of the Duchamp gangs, the one that ends up being the lone survivor. Like, there was one cutaway that I thought, oh, that was at least an attempt, like an attempt at humor. I almost would like have to have seen more of that, maybe. But like, I think he was supposed to be comedic relief, comic relief, and it was just like, you know, they had all the right setups. I think the structure was good for the most part. The intentions were there. It's just how they were executed and the payoff. I just, you know, like the detective and his dog, is that okay? It's kind of like, oh, it's a bit unexpected, but at the same time, it's like, we're dedicating a lot of screen time to this, and the payoff was, oh, the detective, spoiler, gets shot and dies on the top of the gazebo, and the dog is then connects with Alden Ehrenreich's character Eddie, and so he needs something to fill that void, that hole left by his wife dying. So then he takes the dog, and so there's that. So that was the payoff, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm just saying, for the amount of, you know what I'm saying. I don't need to beat a dead horse here. I sound like a fucking broken record, but I thought there would be more. I just thought there would be more. I just thought it would be different. So I don't know. We really need to go through the plot. It's just like, it's tough. Like that paramedic scene, I was like, okay, I saw it in the trailer and I was like, okay, that's going to be the scene that really is going to put this over the top and put this as one of the top comedies of not just this year, but possibly of the past 10 years, 5 years, whatever. And it ends with like the guy getting his hand ripped off, which was fucking so disgusting. And then her not paying attention behind the wheel and hitting and driving into a tree at full speed and getting ejected through the windshield and rolling to a stop, and her dead face, like close up of her dead face looking into the camera. It's just like, again, is this a comedy? I just, it's a horror movie. It's a horror action movie that tried to be funny. And I don't think it succeeded to the level that warrants all this fucking positive buzz and talk. So, all right. I guess we do trivia. This, as I mentioned, this is Ray Liotta's final completed film role before his passing. Right around Memorial Day of 2022. He passed away a week after he came to re-record his lines in post-production. So yeah, the true event that happened in '85, this Andrew Thornton character was a corrupt Kentucky cop and a lawyer turned drug smuggler. Oh, okay. So there's two different people. So the lawyer turned drug smuggler is Andrew Thornton, right? And then there's a corrupt Kentucky cop, which I guess in this instance is this Reba character who is just so, like if it was a white guy, everyone would be like, wow, that's like the fucking blandest character of all time. But it's played by a black woman. But just brought like little to nothing to that role. Again, it was just like a plot device. It was just like, okay, we need a plot twist. Here's the plot twist. She's the one that's in like helping Sid out, the drug dealer, to track down the cocaine. It's just very like shoulder shrug type moment. And again, it's just, I think it's just, she's just there so that when Sid goes to kill her, O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character, we start to see him in this light of, oh, he's not all bad type of thing. I don't know. The Bear ate $20 million worth of cocaine in '85, which is $55 million adjusted for inflation. So yeah, that's a lot of money that people are going to be pissed about. So yeah, very loosely based on the actual bear. No rampage actually him. In fact, no attacks by the bear recorded, all inspired by a Reddit post recounting the story. There was probably a 5-minute window before he died where he was the most dangerous apex predator on the continent. And that's what spurred the thought process. The film opens with Jane, the song Jane by the track Jane by Jefferson Starship, which was also featured in Wet Hot American Summer. So I thought that was kind of an interesting subtle wink nod from Elizabeth Banks. Like, where like, so then that also puts me in the mindset like, oh, this is gonna be, I guess this is along the lines of Wet Hot American Summer, and it's just not, like, it's not Wet Hot American Summer by any means. And maybe that's the way it should have gone. Like, it should have been that kind of approach as opposed to this. But I don't know. Based on the book called Bluegrass Conspiracy, Story of Corruption, Drugs, Money, and a Dead Bear, several prominent members of a powerful Kentucky families and government, a true but very fictionalized account of the story. All right, not a whole lot of trivia. Again, this is why I was like almost against reviewing it, because I was like, the thought was, oh, I'm gonna watch it on Monday and I'm gonna give like a fucking glowing review. You gotta see this. You don't got to see this in theaters. You can wait for it in streaming. I don't know that you're really missing anything that potential life-changing or like culture shifting, you know, that kind of seismic type movement type thing. That's not this movie. It's just not. You're not coming away, like, I'm not quoting any lines. To me, like a comedy movie that causes a seismic shift in culture, it enters the zeitgeist, similar to Anchorman. Like, quotable lines, memorable characters that stick out to you, potential for Halloween costumes. You know, there's all these little check boxes, lists that you can go down and check off that you say, yep, this has now entered the zeitgeist. This is going to be on, you know, people's lists of favorite comedies, and it's more of a horror movie. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to the M3GAN review, because that is a horror comedy that pulls it off the right way, I think. So what did the critics say? Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, gave the film a score of 54 out of 100, with 58 critics giving mixed or average reviews. Cinema Score gave the film an average grade of B-, It's a bit high in my opinion. Post Track, which polls people leaving the theaters, gave it an 80% positive score with 67% saying they would definitely recommend it. I'm not part of that group. I guess I don't not recommend it. It's just like you really need to temper your expectations. Or if you're the type of person that enjoys that kind of comedy, you're going to love it. Observer film critic Mark Kermode rated the film 3 out of 5, saying it may not be Grizzly Man meets Scarface, but it leaves snakes on a plane standing on the runway. Again, I have not seen Snakes on a Plane, but like with Snakes on a Plane, you didn't even have to see the movie. We came away with Samuel L. Jackson's quote. Like, I'm tired of these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane. And maybe I should watch that today just to like compare and contrast. Cause I mean, yeah, I get it. It's a B movie. It's supposed to be a B movie, right? Midnight showing type of B movie. I know people have mentioned, and I've seen this movie, and I probably should watch it. Velocipaster, where it's like a pastor that can morph into a velociraptor. Like, it's just absurd. And maybe that's like the only thing that is needed for it to be funny throughout. But I don't know. So what did Rotten Tomatoes? 70% of all critics gave it a favorable review with an average rating of 6.2 out of 10, while top critics, only 53% of top critics gave it a favorable review with an average rating of 5.1 out of 10. I was looking on IMDb. The IMDb rating for this is like 6.4 out of 10. And I think I gave it a 6 out of 10. And I would probably, if I had to do it over, I'd do like a mid to high 5, which you can't do on IMDb, but it would be probably a high 5. And if you give it a grade, definitely not a B minus, C plus. Critics' consensus: despite Cocaine Bear's half-baked plot and uneven acting, the titular fur fiend's scene-snorting frenzy will give B movie enthusiasts a contact high. Yeah, so I guess that is the audience, and maybe that's where I guess there was a disconnect for me. Is like, I don't like Zombievers. I should watch that and see what I'd come away with it. Like, is it fun in a way? Like, are the death scenes, and maybe that's the other part of it, is like, are the death scenes fun/funny? Like, they're weird. A lot of these death scenes in this movie are like, maybe just hit a little too close to reality. Like, I could see that really happening, and that's like, oh, that's real. That's not over the top, zany, wild. I mean, I guess they're in the train. I don't know. What did the audience have to say? So 75% of the verified audience gave it a favorable review with an average rating of 3.9 out of 5, and 76% of all audience gave it a favorable review with 3.9 out of 5 average rating. I'd say lower than that, lower than 3.9. I'd say, I guess oh boy, 3 out of 5? Yeah, I guess 3 out of 5, because 3.5, that's like the cutoff mark for whether it's fresh or rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. 3.5 out of 5. If you go 3.5 or more, it's considered fresh, quote unquote. And then anything below that is rotten, which is such a crazy way to, people look at that 70% or the 53% and think, oh, that's 70 out of 100 or 53 out of 100. And it's like, doesn't really line up like that. And to see audience be 75, 76, they think that's out of 100. It's like, no, that's just based on this crazy arbitrary 3.5. So I give it a 3 out of 5. I didn't want my money back. I didn't walk out of the movie. It wasn't to that level, but it was just like, this could have been so much better. It's just like, there's just overfloweth with opportunities, and like they had decent plot points. There's a lot of it that they could have stripped away. There's a lot of it that it could have been like, and I get the reasoning behind it, and I don't have major beef with a lot of the reasoning behind a lot of what they decided to add and insert into the story. But it did feel like, well, we don't have enough here, and so we had to keep adding things, whereas you could have maybe streamlined it a bit more. Yeah, it's but I mean, again, I do think the horror aspects of it, and maybe this is where there's a disconnect with me. If this is just a horror movie, okay, and I should have, that's how my mind should have approached this. That's how I should approach this from a mindset standpoint. A good-ish horror movie. But in terms of a comedy, it fell way short of expectations and fell flat for me. But from a horror movie, it's like, it definitely elicited fear, and not so much fear, but the guttural, visceral reactions. I definitely had those. I mean, when the park ranger falls out of the back of the ambulance and like skids to a stop on her face, I was like about to puke. And, when the Cubs are eating Ray Liotta's entrails, and when the male paramedic's hand is like dangling by a tendon, that all, like physical reactions. Is that fun for me? No. But yeah, so that's Cocaine Bear. I apologize. I guess I should apologize. I don't know what I should do. My mom texted me and was like, oh my God, have you heard about this movie Cocaine Bear? Which, things are fucking blowing up when your 72-year-old mother is like, have you heard about this movie? Anytime she's like, have you heard about it? It's like, okay, it's now hit that status, like mass status, whatever the fuck they call it. It's entered the zeitgeist sort of thing. And so I was like, yeah. And they were like, the person I was watching, they said that they were laughing throughout the whole movie. And I was like, then that person is a psycho. Okay. If you're laughing throughout this entire movie, I don't know. I guess I shouldn't knock you. To each their own. If you're laughing throughout this entire movie, I don't know if I want to hang out with you, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. So now we're going to see how that differs. Like, okay, now how does that compare and contrast to M3GAN, another horror comedy? So let's talk about M3GAN. This is a horror comedy. A robotics engineer at a toy company played by Allison Williams from Get Out, builds a lifelike doll that begins to take on a life of its own. M3GAN, which is stylized as M3GAN, stands for Model 3 Generative Android. It's directed by Gerard Johnstone, who doesn't have any credits that I recognize. I think he has like 4 or 5 other credits. I think they're mostly TV or shorts. Screenplays by Akila Cooper, who co-wrote Malignant and has writing credits for Grimm, TV series like Grimm the 100, American Horror Story, and Luke Cage. Stories by Akila Cooper and James Wan, who is known for, this guy's like a horror aficionado, connoisseur. Annabelle, The Nun, a couple of movies, installments of the Saw franchise, Aquaman, which is not horror, but could use some horror elements to make it different. Malignant, which he co-wrote with Akila Cooper, and then one of the Conjuring movies, produced by Blumhouse Productions, that have become kind of like the top production company when it comes to horror, I would say. Atomic Monster Productions and Divide Conquer is distributed by Universal Pictures and released on January 6th in theaters, and then it hit streaming this past week. Yeah, end of February. Running time of 102 minutes, which is like perfect. Not too long, not too short. Had a budget of $12 million and made almost $175 million at the box office. I was about to say $200 million, but it was like, this kind of feels like a lie, like a big major lie. And I don't want to lie to you, not to your face. The cast, as I mentioned, Allison Williams as Gemma. She plays the engineer who works at the high-tech toy company in Seattle called Funky. And she has a niece named Katie. And Katie is the 8-year-old girl who lost her parents in a tragic snow plow accident, where like I believe that was the opening scene where she's playing on her iPad. The way this movie opens, we'll get to it, was so clever and fun and funny. And it's like that's where, or if we're comparing M3GAN to Cocaine Bear, like that's M3GAN, you win that round. Because the opening scene, even though the opening scene Cocaine Bear with the drug smuggler, and Matthew Reese, whatever, like that was good and kind of set the tone, was nice. This one, the commercial that they open with in M3GAN is just like, all right. I immediately was like, I think I'm going to like this movie. As soon as that commercial came on, I was like, all right, I know I'm going to like this movie. Violet McGraw plays Katie, the 8-year-old niece of Gemma. Ronnie Chang, who is a stand-up comedian, and I've seen clips of. I don't think I've ever seen his full special, but I've seen clips. He's a pretty funny dude. Plays David, Gemma's boss at Funky. Amy Donald is the body, the actor in the body of M3GAN, and then Jenna Davis is the voice of M3GAN. Brian Jordan Alvarez as Cole, Gemma's lab partner. Jen Van Epps as Tess, Gemma's lab partner. Stephanie Garneau-Montagne as Stephane. Looks like Stephanie. Again, I'm old and white. What do you want? So Kurt plays Kurt, David's assistant. Lori Dungy as Celia, the next door neighbor with the annoying dog. The kind of a vicious dog. Amy Usherwood as Lydia, the therapist, who I guess either Gemma hired or Katie's grandparents hire to see if Gemma is an actual fit. like suitable to be a parent or a legal guardian to Katie. So then we can talk about the plot. That opening scene with the commercial, it's a fake, like not a real commercial, but a commercial for this companion, this little furry pet, almost like a Furby. Remember Furbies? Kind of looks like a Furby a little bit, but it way more technologically advanced, high-tech toy that, comes with an app. And so Katie's playing with the iPad that has that app for, I guess it's, what's it called? Something pet, forever pet, but it's like FUR ever pet. Cause like, it's just like the lyrics in the song of the commercial are funny. Like, we'll live longer than you once you've died and gone to heaven. Like, it's just like that right there is hilarious. And so I was like, oh, this, like, because I saw this after Cocaine Bear. I streamed it on Peacock. And as soon as that played, I was like, I know for a fact that this is going to be better than Cocaine Bear. Like, funnier for sure. Because this is already funnier. Like, this commercial alone is good. It gave me kind of RoboCop vibes. The original RoboCop, because the original RoboCop, they had those little vignettes or commercials or parodies where it's like, I'd buy that for $1, like that kind of vibe and feeling to it. So I appreciated that, and I like that a lot. So yeah, she's playing with this this toy where you can feed it virtually, and then it will actually fart and burp and like actually poop at one point. I think it does. And so the mother and the father's driving, her mother's in the passenger seat. And I can't tell you how close this hit to home, where it's like they're arguing about screen time because Katie's constantly on this iPad with this forever pet, companion pet. And, the mother's like, we really need to cut down on her screen time. And the dad's like, I didn't give her the iPad and tell her to play with her toy. Like, that wasn't my decision. And it's like, wow. Jesus Christ, I've had that conversation with my now ex-wife, but my then wife, about like, well, why did you do it then? Like, it's almost like you're talking, like the spouse is actually arguing or talking with herself. It's like, why did I do it? But instead of saying, why did I do that? She said, why did we do this? It's like, well, we didn't do that. You did that. And now I got to act like this was a team effort. So that was kind of running through my head through that opening scene, and even through the first scenes with Gemma interacting with Katie. It's like, man, these aren't terribly likable characters. Like, I always feel like, and I've heard this in interviews with actors and writers and producers. It's like it goes a long way for a movie to be popular and successful when you do have a likable character or a highly sympathetic character. And it's like, even though I kind of identified and related to that argument that the parents are having right before the snowplow accident, that reminds me of how awful my relationship was, or like how awful I was in that moment in my own life. And so I was like, oh, like, who's going to be, because then they introduced Gemma, and Gemma's like covertly using company resources to build this develop M3GAN, the child-sized humanoid robot doll. And it's like, she doesn't get fired. And I'm like, God damn it, I've been fired for way less than that. Way less than that I've been fired. Oh boy. Which I guess is a testament to how unlikable I am. That makes sense now. But so I was like looking for that likable type, because normally, I think in most movies where you have that tragic passing of a loved one or a parent or a sibling, that kind of that major trauma that one of the protagonists suffers, you really like lean on, I think the trope or the traditional approach would be like you lean on like something that's I guess not romantic, but like emotional, and for them to go, I thought it was interesting that they took that approach with the opening scene, the passing of the parents, where it was like not too likable. It's kind of not a great moment to go out on, so I thought that was interesting. It just holds up a mirror to, in that one scene alone, it holds up a mirror to like, okay, it really sets everything up nicely, because it's like screen time is a major consideration for parents and for childhood development. And the substitute, and I did this the fucking previous weekend with my daughter, where it's like I was just exhausted rough week, and we did end up going to a birthday party, but like the next day, that Sunday was the laziest of Sundays, and it was like nonstop screen time. You know, I mean, luckily she was also doing her sticker book, but it's like, you know, so I do like how they had a lot of great setups and a lot of great payoffs, and they touched on a lot of themes that are just so front of mind, at the forefront for a lot of parents, you know. And that's why it was even when Katie's introduced to Gemma, or when Gemma's supposed to be taking on Katie, Gemma has kind of a very like almost detached attitude. And it's just like, your sister just died and this is your niece and this is how you're behaving. It's like, whoa. So I thought that was interesting too. But you know, that's kind of stuck in my craw as I'm watching it, you know, kind of like after you eat popcorn, you get the kernel stuck and you're like tonguing at it. That's kind of what was sticking in my head as I'm watching. I'm like, whoa, usually this new legal guardian would make more of an effort at the outset to make this girl feel more at home and blah, blah, but she's so wrapped up in her work and her profession, her career, that her niece, Katie, takes the back seat, is second banana, which is like, and then I'm thinking to myself, oh, like it just started to click. And I was like, I understand why they made this decision with this character. I understand why Allison Williams is doing that, where the direction's coming from, because maybe it seems like she didn't want that life. She's not looking for, I mean, she's on the dating apps, but like, that's where she's at in her development. Like she's a grown ass adult, probably late 20s, early 30s. But she's not even in a serious relationship. And now she has I guess you'd say, quote unquote, burden, but the responsibility, the task of raising this girl who's in her formative years, 8 years old. I mean, she's not, you know, she still has, and now has experienced this huge trauma, and Gemma's just completely ill-equipped and unprepared for that. But I was like, when is it gonna click and hit, you know, for her? And I was expecting more of a like, maybe she's so in shock and numb to it. You know, sometimes it happens with a really traumatic event that you it doesn't initially process, it like does not compute. And then eventually something happens. And so I thought that was going to happen. And it kind of did towards the end, but I was expecting more of an emotional cathartic release. And I don't know that we ever got that, but I think that's more of a reflection of the character. Like, that's just the character. This character has the certain personality where they gravitate more towards relationships with technology than they do with relationships with humans. Because you see how not just her relationship with Katie, but Gemma's relationship with other people. She's like, it takes her pretty much the length of the movie to get better at that, because she stinks at it, you know, from her relationship with her neighbor to the way that she handles the therapist. Like, it's just, you're just like, oh man, wrong. You're handling this wrong. And that's coming from someone who sucks at relationships. And I guess that's, you know, part of it is like, I'm just now having this, I mean, I don't want to say like awakening. That sounds so fucking stupid. An epiphany is just overblown. But it's, you know, I'm just realizing that you look back at, you know, because I've had more alone time. And so you start to get in your head and your thoughts, and you think, okay, my 20s, I thought I was this like fun party guy, but maybe I was just a complete and total douche asshole. And I was like laughing about it then, because I was like kind of self-aware, like, oh, I'm an asshole, I'm a douche. But like wasn't doing anything to counteract that or make that not the case. You know what I mean? And then my 30s, like thinking that I like, oh, I'm doing all the right things in terms of finding a girlfriend and all the nice relationship things, and didn't address a lot of the things that needed to be addressed. And I probably could have avoided a lot of what happened. So yeah, coming from me, it's like, oh, hypocrite much? But yeah, the way she went about handling all of that. And I, to this day, I still do a lot of what Gemma did in that movie, but it's interesting seeing it from an outsider's perspective, looking at it. Like, if I could just separate myself and have that out-of-body experience as things are happening, I could be like, oh, no, don't do that. But in the moment, first person POV, you just don't think that way. So I just thought that struck me as interesting. So ultimately she ends up trying to make a bit of a more of an effort to, there was that scene where Katie's like first in Gemma's apartment and wants to play with like these toys that are in their boxes on Gemma's shelf, and Gemma's like, no, those are collectibles. You're not allowed to play with those or touch those. And Katie's like, what? I don't get it. Like, I don't understand. And then the scene when the therapist comes over and is like, I want to see you roll this ball. Like, I want to see you interact with Katie. I want to see Gemma interact with Katie, and I want to see you roll this ball back and forth. And Gemma's like, well, it's not a ball, it's a collectible, and da-da-da-da. And she kind of hears herself and is like, okay, this is a little bit absurd. But it's still that part of her that's like, can't let it go. Like, God damn it, this is a collectible. This is not how you use it. This is not right. That kind of thing. Which I think is natural and inherent for someone that works with technology. Like based on my personality type, like even though I like drinking and partying and stuff like that, it's like the actual social element of it is I want to entertain people. It's not, I want to connect with people. Although I do want to connect with people. I think all humans want to connect with people, but for the most part, anyway, this is getting way off the rails. So after she has Katie asks Gemma, like, hey, what's this big ass robot you got just stashed in the corner of your home office? Gemma's like, oh, this is Bruce and this is how it works. And she has the gloves, like almost like the Nintendo gloves, or the gloves from what was that robot boxing movie with Hugh Jackman? I forget what it's called, but like you have these gloves and you turn them on and they can control the arms, the limbs of this giant robot named Bruce. And so that's when they kind of start to connect a little bit and bond. And I was thinking to myself, that's a setup. And that's going to have a great payoff. I know it is. And even though I kind of saw the payoff coming, the fact that I saw it coming and still pumped my fist and was like, yes, when it happened, that's a sign of a great movie. When you can pull that off, when an audience, when a swath of the audience knows that that's going to come into play, and it does come into play, and it still clicks and hits and slaps and bangs, whatever the fuck the kids say nowadays. Like, that's a testament to how good this movie is and how Cocaine Bear pales in comparison. And I'm going to continue to compare and contrast because I don't think I did a good job in the Cocaine Bear of showing and indicating why things didn't necessarily land with me. So that's when Gemma's like, all right, I know my boss told me cut it out with this new M3GAN project, but after seeing how my niece interacts with this giant ass, like kind of 1.0 type robot, like I think I should continue working on M3GAN. So she does, and she ends up finishing it with the help of her lab partners, Tess and Cole. And she's able to get it up and running, and she's able to pair it with Katie. So Katie is the kind of like when they say when a child is first born, they typically, the nurse or the doctor will immediately try and get give the baby to the mom and have the baby's skin touch the mother's skin, because that's like pairing mode for for humans. That's the initial physical bond that they have. And it makes sense because my daughter loves her mother. And she's like, yeah, Dad, you're all right. You give me food and shelter, so you're okay in my book. I didn't get to do the whole like press my face against her face or have her face touch my skin. The skin to skin contact is what apparently is the, I guess they call it imprinting. It happens with other animals too. Like it happens with, they mention it in some other movies, maybe Jurassic Park, where it's like, oh, this human comes across this baby, whatever, and the mother creature is dead or gone or somewhere else. And so that creature then imprints or bonds with that other being. And that's when M3GAN receives instructions and orders like, hey, your prime directive, we mentioned that there's RoboCop vibes to this. And I think that's why I liked it so much, is because I got RoboCop vibes. But they were like, your prime directive is to serve and protect Katie. So that M3GAN then, you can see where this goes. M3GAN then takes that to a whole nother level and is like, okay, this is a threat. That's a threat. That's a threat. That threat needs to be eliminated because that is a threat. Like that's kind of binary way that the android thinks. It's like, well, that's a threat, and we can't have threats, so we got to eliminate the threat. And so that's when she goes on her slowly but surely she goes on the killing spree. So she kills. You see like the dog. So Katie's shooting the fake arrows in the front yard, and you can see like from M3GAN's point of view, she's like scanning and able to identify certain things like, okay, that's a butterfly, not a threat. Okay, that's a plane flying overhead, not a threat. And although Katie has a bow and arrow, which are weapons, they are toy weapons, and I understand that. And so I'm not viewing her as a threat or a threat to herself. Like she's not going to hurt herself. And then Katie's like, hey, I lost an arrow. Can you find it? And so she looks and she sees the arrow in the hole in the fence and goes to retrieve it. And that's when so we had already seen Gemma get super pissed at her neighbor for the dog coming into her yard and shitting on her driveway and just barking and causing a ruckus. And so, when M3GAN goes to reach through the hole to get the arrow, the dog then bites down and pulls her into the yard. And so that's when M3GAN takes things into her own hands and the dog disappears. And so the neighbor, Celia, comes over and starts accusing Gemma of doing something to the dog. Gemma starts to pick up on like, okay, I am losing control. Control. Where at first it's nice to have this an extra set of eyes and hands to attend to Katie, but now because it frees me up to do more of focus on my career and focus on my work because I'm not equipped to be this legal guardian parent role model. And so it's nice that she was rattling off statistics and I was like, I guess that would be nice. Like I hate repeating myself and I do find myself repeating myself with what I say to my daughter. So it'd be cool to like have something stand in for those moments. She rattled off some stat. It was like 77% of what parents say to their kids are repeated instructions or something like that. I was like, whoa. Oh my God. That's the bulk of my relationship with my daughter is just saying, wash your hands, flush the toilet. It would be nice to have a stand in there so I don't have to repeat myself because I have this weird thing about repeating myself and also rewatching things. Like I want to make the most of my time here on earth. And I think if I'm doing something that I've already done before, then it feels like I'm not moving any further in life. Dude, I realize I sound like a fucking maniac. I get it. It's why am I by myself? So, but then that starts to like Katie only responds to M3GAN, right, to the android, and has become so overly attached and grown that she's not listening to Gemma at all and doesn't view her as an authority figure or has any connection with Gemma whatsoever. And so that's when the red flags start to go up for Gemma. She starts to become suspicious and, starts to look into this school because I guess Katie was homeschooled before when her parents were, before her parents were tragically killed in a car accident, that she was homeschooled. And so she doesn't really have, Gemma thinks, okay, this will help you with your social skills if we send you to a school. It's not a normal school. It's going to be a school that's a little bit different, a little unorthodox, an alternative school where they're outdoors more often. And, it's supposed to be highly regarded or whatever. And so Katie's like, absolutely not. No fucking way. Or can M3GAN come? And Gemma's like, no. And then eventually that's that scene. I mean, they really nailed what it's like to be a parent, even though Gemma's like historically not a parent. There is that scene where Gemma drops Katie off at the school and M3GAN's next to Katie and can M3GAN come? Katie's like, can M3GAN come? And Gemma's like, no, I have to take her into the lab for diagnostics. We got to fix there's something wrong with her. And then the teacher coming up, whatever the camp counselor or whatever it is, coming up and be like, oh, your friend? And just being like, oh, whoa. Oh, so is that a robot? Like, but then still after noticing it's a creepy robot being like, well, we have this toy table and they could, put the toy on the table and you can see they put M3GAN like on this toy table next to all these stuffed animals and she completely sticks out like a sore thumb. But yeah, there's a bully at the school, Brandon. And so Brandon, follows Katie out somewhere and starts bullying her. And that's when M3GAN takes things into her own hands. And oh god, that scene where she kills Brandon, pulls his ear off. Whoa. I was like, but that again, Neal, you're a hypocrite. Like there was ultra violent scenes like that in Cocaine Bear, but you weren't entertained or enjoyed it or whatever. You didn't think it was fun. I mean, this was so clear. Like an ear does not stretch that far. Like I've never seen an ear stretch that far. So the part of it was like, oh my God, ears can do that. Like that's where it differentiates, as opposed to, it's a hand dangling by a ligament. Fucking gross. So yeah, she ends up tearing his ear off. And then her running on all fours felt... I remember seeing that in the trailer, because I remember seeing the trailer for this, and I was like, all right, I don't need to see this. This is just another Annabelle or The Conjuring or The Nun. Like most of James Wan's work, where it's just like, all right, I don't like a killer doll. Cool. It was... and I remember seeing that in the trailer and being like, all right, yeah, I don't really need to see this movie. That's preposterous. Why would a humanoid doll need to run on all fours? Like, it seems like it's not conducive to running, like whatever. But I think there was an explanation for it in the movie, and then I also saw it in the trivia, which hopefully I'll get to. But Brandon runs into a road and gets hit by a passing car and dies. So I did. I mean, the scene that precedes that, or is like in conjunction with that, where Gemma and Brandon's mom or stepmom are at the table, like doing something, forget what, preparing lunch maybe. And, Brandon's stepmother is just glowing about him and just raving about him. And then he's like, oh, shut the fuck up, Diane, or whatever. I do get those vibes when I go to my daughter's daycare, to her school, but also to like birthday parties, where it's like, oh, you have no control over your kid. And I know you're kind of brushing this off and talking like it's not an issue, but this is, I see this becoming an issue. That's always tough. And now also put yourself in that parent's shoes. It's like, you're trying to, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at my daughter and been like, oh my God, this is going to be such a major issue, and I'm not addressing it, and I'm just hoping to sweep it under the rug. So M3GAN eventually, Celia keeps pressing on Gemma and being like, calls the cops and is like, you need to investigate this woman. She obviously hates my dog and has a personal vendetta against the dog. Like, she definitely has something to do with it. And now that Gemma was also found at the scene where this kid was hit by a car, it's like the cops start doing the math and connecting the dots, and the red string connects them. So, M3GAN notices how Celia poses a threat and takes her out with whatever the fuck. I mean, that was just an interesting death scene. And I think that's what, again, separates it from Cocaine Bear. Because Cocaine Bear is like, he just bites them, rips them apart with his mouth or his claws. The death scenes in M3GAN is like, they just get creative. It's just like Celia's death scene, where it's like, I guess that's pesticide. I don't even know what that is. Where it's like, like a bug spray type thing, but like heavy duty pesticide, like DMT type stuff times a million on steroids, where she's spraying Celia in the face, and you can see Celia's face melting, throwing a knife and having it stick through her hand to stick it, just inventive, creative death scenes versus here's just a bear eating people. And I guess you could say like, well then what do you think about Jaws, Neal? And it's like, well, okay, maybe Cocaine Bear could have been more like Jaws in certain respects, where it's like you don't see part of the mystery and suspense and the thrill of Jaws was that you don't get to see, you only see glimpses or here and there glimpses of the shark, and you don't actually see the attack, but you just see like, I mean, the scene that in Jaws that sticks out to me is like, okay, the shark, you see a swimmer, and then the swimmer just fucking gets yanked under the water, and then there's just a cloud of red. It's just like, whoa, what the fuck? And your imagination runs wild. Whereas with the bear, I mean, I'm not going to hound on it, but you get what I'm saying. You get it. So yeah, at this point, I think M3GAN, M3GAN has presented to David, and David's initially like, what the fuck? Told you to shut it down, but then sees it interacting with Katie and is just like, oh my God. You know, you are able to see the positive applications and benefits of this toy, this companion, because she's able to help Katie process the death of her parents and her feelings. And it's just like, whoa, okay, this is not just your normal run-of-the-mill toy. This is life-changing, culture-changing type stuff on par with like the original iPhone. You know what I'm saying? So David's like, yes, we gotta fast track this, because we can't have the competition beating us to the punch, because he, in a previous scene where he discovers that Gemma is working on M3GAN and shuts it down, he's like, have you heard about this whatever rival toy company that has released a Furby-esque type pet companion on par with their Forever Pet or whatever, that is like half the price. So that was the initial ask, is like, shut down M3GAN and create the Furby type thing for half the price, you know? And so it turns out that his assistant, David's assistant, Kurt, is the one who's stealing the files and sending it to a rival, you know, because he's getting paid buku cash to leak those documents and those files, proprietary files. So they plan an unveiling, or like a presentation where they're going to unveil it to the world. And at this point, Gemma has become very suspicious of M3GAN and attempts to check her video logs, only to find the files corrupted, deleted, or missing. She brings her to the lab where Tess and Cole attempt to fix her. Katie becomes irrationally angry, which is spot on, because it's like, think about when you were a kid. At least for me, I think there have been instances where, as a kid, you know, you're playing a video game, and it's like you've probably been playing that video game for way too long, and your mother's been calling for you to come to dinner for way too long, and she's fed up and has had enough, and you're like right in the middle of that tough level with that boss you just can't beat, and you've made such progress, and you feel like you're finally about to overcome that obstacle and jump over that hurdle, and then your mom just turns off the video game completely, and you haven't been able to save it, and you lose your shit. Like, definitely I've had that moment, and I think that's exactly what's happened here, where Katie's becoming attached to M3GAN. M3GAN's been taken away, ripped away from her, and so she freaks out. And then that's when Gemma kind of it finally hits. Finally, this is the moment, right, that we've been waiting for the entire movie, where Gemma finally is able to address the situation at hand and says she apologizes to Katie and tells her that M3GAN is only a distraction for coping with her loss, not a solution, put more eloquently than that. And I thought that was a pretty powerful moment, powerful scene, and it was pretty cool. So they try to terminate M3GAN, can't do it. M3GAN has the ability to like take over other technology. So like, for instance, the cell phone, when Gemma calls Tess's cell phone, M3GAN is able to pick up silently and impersonate Tess's voice. And so Gemma's a little like, well, that didn't sound right. And so that's when M3GAN is able to escape. She attacks Cole, almost kills Cole. Tess saves Cole. And Gemma decides to take Katie home and leave the presentation, because she's like, I can't go through with this. And she's able to create an explosion in the lab. She then, as she's exiting the building, she runs into David. She kills him with like where did she find that sword? It's like some kind of samurai sword. Where did she get that? Like, that's just a creative, inventive death scene. Like, okay, what the fuck? Puts it through his chest as Kurt's in the elevator, and then is able to like confronts Kurt and is like, yeah, I know. She basically just lays it all out. Like, this is how it's going to go down. You were stealing files, and your boss confronted you and said that you were going to be in trouble. So you killed him and then killed yourself. And then she kills Kurt, stages it as a murder suicide. She then steals a sports car, which I thought was interesting. You just see this doll like walking down the stairs to this like such a gorgeous looking sports car, Lamborghini, Bugatti, some kind of hypercar like that, and drives back to Gemma's house, confronts Gemma. Gemma tries to stop her, disfigures her in the process, and is able to overpower her. But then it looks like so M3GAN is choking the life out of Gemma, I believe, and is about to kill her. And then that's when Katie comes in with the gloves, the Nintendo gloves, the gloves from that robot boxing movie with Hugh Jackman, and is able to control Bruce. And Bruce, he get it, and is able to tear M3GAN in half. But of course, in all good horror movies, that's just when you think it's over, it's not. And M3GAN, their top half remains active, and she attacks Katie, and that's when they're able to expose the processing chip in M3GAN's head, and Katie stabs with a screwdriver, which appears to destroy M3GAN, which is the payoff for the setup that we saw when Bruce was first introduced. And and Gemma is like walking Katie through all the various ins and outs mechanisms of Bruce. She opens up the face kind of interface type thing and shows, okay, this is right here is where the processor is. And so Katie's like, oh, that's like the brain. She's like, yeah, it's like the brain. So I thought that was a great callback and a great payoff. And then as Gemma and Katie are leaving the home, Gemma's AI home device, Elsie, turns on by itself and the camera looks toward them. So that's kind of a nice little leaving the door open for a sequel. Oh boy, what a movie. So good. I loved it. I loved it more than I probably should have. I guess if you're, and we'll get to the critics, but let's go through the trivia first and then we'll get to the critics. The film was originally shot as an R-rated movie until the producers noticed while editing that was close enough to be PG-13. So they reshot scenes to tone it down, the violence, and thought it would become more effective than actually seeing the violence on screen, a la what we saw in Jaws, but not in Cocaine Bear. Jason Blum cited Drag Me to Hell as a good PG-13 horror film that was effective. And yeah, I remember seeing Drag Me to Hell and being thoroughly filled with dread and scared. Their use of sound effects, lighting, shadows, it definitely, oh man, the lady who comes looking for a loan, because that's the main character, the protagonist, works at that kind of company, a bank, I believe. And the old lady who's like kind of a gypsy type looking lady, just like, but has like the one cataract eye and the mole. And it's just like, you're not supposed to judge a book by a cover. I get it. But it was just a scary looking woman. So yeah, Drag Me to Hell was pretty effective. I didn't realize it was PG-13, but yeah, it makes sense. So I did not see the PG-13 movie. I saw this was the unrated version of the movie, and so maybe that's why my opinion is so high, because like it did, even though it was unrated and that gives them free license to like do whatever the fuck they want. They didn't go like crazy over the top with it. And it was like the scenes that did have those that could be considered ultra graphic or violent or gory wasn't to the point of like, oh, this is just, whatever. The song M3GAN plays on the piano is Toy Soldiers, which I thought was a great choice because I think she probably views herself as a toy soldier. The idea of the film began when James Wan's Atomic Monster Productions was brainstorming story ideas and chose one about Killer Doll, although Wan produced Annabelle, which is about a killer doll. Pretty much the concept is about embracing technology too much and relying too much on it, and what happens when technology runs amok. It's commentary on the world we live in, and it feels relevant. And I'd say, yeah, dude, you nailed it. Jason Blum stated the film would have black comedy elements, which is one reason Gerard Johnstone was chosen to direct, saying, we needed someone who can do the thrills and set pieces, but can also has a cheeky approach. And I guess Johnstone's film Housebound, which I've never heard of, balances that horror and comedy elements by creating tones that's frightening and humorous, which they nailed on both fronts. A technician uses a pen to track M3GAN's eye movement. The way the scene is presented through M3GAN's POV is very similar to the montage scene where Officer Murphy is reconstructed in 1987's RoboCop. And this is the other movie that, and I guess this is why the critics that panned it or that had negative reviews, they use the word derivative, which I guess when you're a movie critic and you're seeing every movie that ever releases, that can weigh on you. And you're like, this is a derivative. I've seen this before. I've seen this before. I've seen this before. But it's not, I don't know. They treat derivative like it has a negative connotation and they view it as a negative thing. But I think there's a fine line. And I know when I'm working on a screenplay right now, and it's like I am heavily leaning on past influences of mine, but also influences that I think would be appropriate for the character, right? Like the character likes this type of music, the character likes this type of movie, the character enjoys whatever. And you can't help like making those connections, right? I like making abstract connections between things that seemingly are unrelated, but like it's they've constructed M3GAN. It's hard not to think about, okay, this feels like this reminds me of that scene in RoboCop, and then to have that scene in the movie without turning to the camera and being like, remember RoboCop? You know, like I think that's fine, dude. I like it. I personally like it. As long as it's not like too shot for shot, I guess. And then it starts to feel like a knockoff parody type thing, spoof. Several sequences make references and homages to Child's Play. So this is another movie that I did not reference in my review, but yeah, it makes total sense. I never saw Child's Play, but that is like one of the crazier things to me is I do remember as a kid, you know, I was 7 or 8 when Child's Play came out, seeing the commercials on TV or seeing appearances because they would have the doll appear on, you know, certain TV shows or movies or whatever as like promotions for the movie, and having so many nightmares about that fucking Chucky doll. So many goddamn nightmares when I was a kid. Never saw the movie. So, I mean, kudos to the creators of that doll in that movie because you have permanently infected my brain. Anyway, in terms of M3GAN, several of the focus shots on Katie are inspired by frames of Andy in some scenes from Child's Play, which I get that. You do look at M3GAN's face and you're like, and I was like, where have I seen this before? And it's like, yep, it's Chucky from Child's Play. Even the battle between Gemma and M3GAN is inspired by the final climax of Child's Play where Karen Barclay confronts Chucky. Okay, well, there you go. So maybe that's why the critics are so harsh on this. Because it's like, yeah, we saw this before, 30 years ago. M3GAN drops to all fours to chase Brandon. Okay, so this is what I was mentioning before. M3GAN drops to all fours to chase Brandon down, likely because of how replicating bipedal movement at high speed is still a problem for real-world robotics scientists. So that, like, to me, having read that, makes that scene that much better. Because you watch it not knowing that. Like, when I saw it in the trailer and not knowing that, I was like, oh, that's just, like, that seems unnecessary. And then you see it, and then I saw it in the movie, and I was like, because I had, like, at that point in the movie, I was already sold on this being a good movie to a great movie. I was like, okay, I kind of like the choice here because she's a predator and, she views herself as an apex predator. And so she is the cocaine bear. Oh, boy. But knowing now that that's because it's, it's just an issue for the scientists that created it, it's like, oh, that makes that scene even better. Kurt had been stealing secrets from the company, as we mentioned, and was likely the reason for Funky's rivals' ability to produce cheaper knockoffs. So basically, they're saying here that is another kind of subtle hint that there's going to be this story isn't done because we saw him copying the files, moving it to his desktop, and that's when David caught him and was like, "Are you looking at porn again?" He's like, "No." He's like, okay. That is one thing I think that maybe they could have. I don't think they fully were able to get the most comedic juice squeezed out of Ronnie Chang. Like, he's like one of the premier stand-up comedians. And I think he brought a nice campy, cheeky, comedic angle bent to his character. It's just like, that's one, and it's such a minor knock. It's just like, I would have liked to see him do more with the character, I think, in a funny way. That didn't feel generic, So yeah, there's Kurt you see him stealing the files and copying to his desktop. So he probably has already, before he dies, has probably already sold those to a rival company. And so they're going to start making Legion or M3GAN knockoffs, and then all hell breaks loose. So you can start to see how this is like about to go. Cry. LC2. I mean, that was the other one that we mentioned towards the end of the plot recap. Like, oh, so this M3GAN's now just like in a bunch of technology. Oh boy. And sure enough, yeah, it's getting a sequel. So if you were in suspense, like, oh my God, it's going to get a sequel. Yeah, it's got a release date of January 17th, 2025, with the title revealed to be M3GAN 2.0. Will be written by Cooper, with Williams and McGraw returning as Gemma and Katie, respectively. So what did the critics say? I'm so glad that you've got that on your mind. On Metacritic, weighted average is 72 out of 100, with generally favorable reviews. Cinema Score gave it a B. I would go so far as to B plus A minus. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because I haven't seen Child's Play, but I have seen RoboCop. Maybe if I have seen Child's Play, I'd be like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is a direct like ripoff of Child's Play. But I don't know. B plus A minus is where I would go with that. And then Post Track gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which I feel is a little low. 93% of all critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it favorable reviews with an average rating of 7.2 out of 10. 95% of top critics gave it a favorable review, which is interesting. It's usually not higher than all critics, with an average rating of 7.2 out of 10. I would say I think I went higher than that. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I gave it an 8 out of 10 on IMDb, which I think it's like a 7.4 on IMDb or something like that. So I think, you know, as time goes on, I might bring that down to like a high 7. But yeah, I usually when I do give it a movie an 8, I say 8 and then I like think about it for 5-10 seconds and then I kind of change it to a 7. Because again, IMDb doesn't give you the ability to do like decimals. So I think if I were to do decimals, it would be like I rounded it to an 8, like a 7. I'd say 7, 7, 7, 8. The critics' consensus: unapologetically silly and all the more entertaining for it, M3GAN is the rare horror comedy that delivers chuckles as effortlessly as chills. Fucking A, dude. Spot on. And it's what Cocaine Bear should have been. I know I'm shitting on Cocaine Bear a lot, but goddamn, if you're going to give that kind of positive buzz to it, gotta back it up. The Independent's Clarice Lowry gave the film a score of 4 out of 5 stars, writing that it feels exactly like watching Mean Girls Queen Bee Regina George if someone had given her a knife and a death wish. Thought that was a good visual. dadofcron.com often says it often works like gangbusters as an over-the-top horror comedy whose fun rests on a toy box full of priceless leering doll reaction shots and cutting remarks. Yep. And that's something that you couldn't do in Cocaine Bear. I don't think. It's a bear, you know? I think that that was what had to have been the major challenge, because it's like how many, you know, and I thought maybe we were getting more of that for some reason. Like you see the bear like take it with its paw and then rub it on its teeth, you know, just something that's more human-esque in its behavior. They did show, I guess, yeah, I can't do too much on Cocaine Bear. Dear God. This was interesting. M3GAN has been described as a gay icon or a queer icon. Eric Piepenberg of the New York Times described M3GAN as being, quote, the gorgeous and loyal but messy and insolent woman, the type of women gay men are protective of, end quote. It was like, okay, I guess I kind of can see that. Very interesting. Yeah, her outfits are very like, the outfit choice was interesting because I guess they wanted to make it look like a doll and not too much like a human child, which makes sense. But at the same time, it does look like something that like a woman who's like strung out on prescription pills would, kind of like Sherry O'Terry's character from Saturday Night Live to that degree, like just a hot mess. What does the audience say? The audience says, as long as you aren't looking for something truly scary or even surprising, M3GAN is often a lot of fun. Okay. Were there a lot of surprises? No. I mean, they did. I feel like they kind of forced a jump scare on us early in the film with the dog. It wasn't too forced, but it was like they didn't, but they also didn't try to like lean on the jump scares too much, which I appreciate. And was it truly scary or even surprising? So I guess this is like, again, we keep comparing it to Cocaine Bear, but this was, I feel like, more campy, cheeky comedy than it was horror, right? And so if you are a true horror fan, you might not like this over Cocaine Bear. And maybe you like Cocaine Bear because of the graphic nature of the horror elements there, not so much the comedy. You know, that's, I guess, the spectrum of horror comedies, you know. And I appreciate movies like M3GAN more because of its clever, subtle use of the comedy within the horror, as opposed to like, we're going to go over the top with like the graphic nature of it, but it's being too reality based as opposed to absurd. I don't know. 78% of the verified audience members on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a favorable review with an average rating of 4 out of 5, while all audience members, 74% of all audience gave it an average rating of 3.9 out of 5. So yeah, I guess I would give it a 4 out of 5, if not a 3.9. Either one of those, basically, just round up to 4. All right, so that's M3GAN. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, watching on YouTube. If you have YouTube, if you subscribe, if you don't, please follow, subscribe, and like, and comment, and rate, and review. And it's a lot to ask of someone, you know. It's a lot to ask, but I think you got the chops. Okay, I believe in you. And we'll talk to you next week. Adios, muchachos.